Hello all. Welcome to Easy Microservices with JHipster. This talk should have been happened yesterday, but there was some misunderstanding, and now we are having this talk now. And thanks for the team. Okay, a little bit about me. I'm Sendil Kumar. I'm a full stack developer at Zebia Labs. I'm also a core dev team member at JHipster. So how many of you here know about JHipster used? Okay, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we have 5 to 10%, great. I'm also a team member at Webpack. How many of you are front-end developers here? 1. Okay, great. I'm also part of Rust WASM working group. How many of you have already heard about Rust? Nobody? Kind of? Okay. You should check this out. Rust is really a cool language. And how many of you heard about WebAssembly? You're not audible? I'm not? Okay. WebAssembly, heard about it, is it? Okay, okay. So nobody. Cool. You should check this out. This is a cool, exciting future of web. I'm a big open source lover. You can see me contributing to many open source projects in GitHub. And also, I've authored a book on full stack development with JHipster. If you guys are interested, go ahead and buy this. It's available in Packet and Amazon. So anybody who has Twitter here can reach me out at Sendil Kumar. So there's one front-end developer here, and then anybody knows about Angular or React? 1, 2, 3. OK, so we have a few people. OK, and anyone worked with Webpack? OK, cool, great. And so most of you, I assume that you guys are backend developers. So how many of you use Spring Boot here? OK, majority of people, great. And how many of you using microservices here? OK, few, 50% of those people. And what do you guys use for microservices? Netflix OSS? How many of you use Netflix here? Netflix OSS? OK, few. OK. Console and tools from HashiCorp, how many of you are using? Nobody? OK. Kubernetes? OK, great. We have few hands. Cool. And how many of you are deploying your microservices daily to the production environment? OK, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, great. OK. So what are the tools that you guys are using for deployment? Jenkins? OK. Sorry? Bamboo Atlassian? Great, yeah. And how many of you are using relying on GitLab CI runner? Oh, 1, great. It's really good. You should check that out. And how many of you feeling the pain in setting up this deployment environment? 2. OK. It's really a repetitive task that you have to do all your day-to-day life, like the same kind of stuff you are going to do for all your applications. It's like kind of the boilerplate stuff. And now, OK, we have seen who has known JHipster. So this is an old guy over here. This guy is called a JHipster, and he is having an Angular tattoo in his neck. So JHipster does have Angular 6 in it. And this is a newer guy, much cooler one, which we'll be seeing in demo. He is having a React tattoo. So the entire application that we are going to see today in the demo is with a React. And JHipster is nothing but Java hipster. So we are a completely open source project. We have more than 10K stats in GitHub. And we have more than 420 plus contributors who are span across multiple countries. And to be sure, like none of them met each other completely. And there are more than 200 plus companies that are using JHipster in production. And just to quote here, most of the people after my talk, they come and ask me how many of the people are using JHipster in the companies. Like there are more than 200 plus companies that came to us and registered that they are using JHipster. These are big banks, big software companies, as well as airline domain companies. And I myself has done more than 30 applications for my customers when I was a consultant. And Zebia Labs, a company which I am working on, has one cool new product which is running on AI and ML, is also using JHipster beneath it. And we have more than 13K plus weekly downloads in NPM package. And this is one thing. How many of you use Sona for code quality? Pretty few, pretty many of you, right? Great. And how many of you know about there is an open source project in SonaCube that is available that helps you to analyze your open source project and gives a feedback on it, like what is the code quality that you have, how many percentage of test coverage that you have, everything. So SonarQube does this part for an open source projects. So we are like pretty first. Consistently, we were like more than 90%. Now we are pushing towards JHipster 5, which is a newer version with Spring Boot 2 and all the newer features, plus React. So that's why our test coverage is slightly lower, 85, but it's pretty high when compared to standards. But we are pushing towards 95% of coverage. And you can see here a sample application that is generated, which has 40K plus lines of code, which means it's really a big application that's getting generated, and it's really useful. So what do JHipster do? How many of you know what do JHipster do? How many of you tried it? One? OK, we have 5 people here. Great. So it's an application generator at its core. So we generate 3 kinds of application. The first one is a monolithic application. The second one is a microservices application. So in microservices, we have taken an opinionated approach in how to create a microservice application. Because there are multiple different frameworks or setups that are available to create a microservice application. We have taken an opinionated approach here. This application that we are generating is a gateway-based microservices or a proxy-based microservices. So you have single entry point for all your microservices stuff. And we do have UAA server. How many of you use UAA server here? Anybody knows about UAA server? UAA server is nothing but user authentication and authorization server, which is helpful in identifying and authenticating your user. We do generate UAA server if you need. And why microservices? Anybody answered for this? Why microservices? 1 point. Agility. Agility, great. Yeah, OK, yep. DevOps. OK. Deploy much more easy? OK. You can do it if you're doing it correct, but it has a lot of pain points in it. But yep, next. Sorry? Reliability, exactly. OK. What else? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Scalability, of course. Scalability, reliability are exactly the same points that I'm looking forward. And also, you do have independent development. Like, every team can take their core, and then they can develop on that particular platform, which means like the exact point what he has said. Like, you have individuality in the development. Like, you can develop it separately, which is really helpful. Independent deployment, so scalable, reliable, comes by the factor that everything is isolated, which means everything can be deployed independently. And most important thing from my perspective is fault isolation, which is kind of like a historic circuit breaker is kind of doing. So you isolate the part that are having faults and then create a new server out of it, which means that you are actually having higher productivity as well as your application has higher availability. And finally, the scalability, you have granular scaling based on the average traffic that you have, based on the expectations that you have, you can increase the traffic of your application, like scalability of your application. But it doesn't come easily. Microservices has a lot of added components in it. For example, it has service registries. How many of you know about service registries here? Yep. So it has service registries, which means every microservice should know about its services that it is running, and it has to connect to those services. On the other hand, we need health checkers here. So health checkers to find out whether an application is up and running. Because in microservices world, everything is dynamic, which means you need to know how the health of the services are there. So just before we go to the demo application, creating a microservices, we'll see what kind of architecture the JHipster provides and what are the options that you have here. OK, how many of you are using IE6? OK, I think you guys are in good time. Great. So in microservices architecture, like the architecture of JHipster has, as browsers. So the browser send in the request. It goes and hits your gateway. So gateway microservice application is nothing but Angular React app with Zool. How many of you use Zool here? Yep. OK, few hands. Zool is a proxy. It helps you to proxy your request to the underneath microservices. Added to that, it also has UAA server embedded in your application, like a user role authentication. Followed by that, it has list of microservices added to it. So you have list of microservices application. And you need a service registry health checker. We have 2 options here. One is console, which is a tool from HashiCorp. And another one is a JHipster registry, which is a tool that has been generated by the JHipster developers itself, and it's completely based on Spring Cloud config. So what is the difference between these two? For example, Console is a consistency-based services, while JHipster registry is an availability-based service, which means, like in JHipster registry, we check for the availability of the registry, which means a cluster is, we generate a JHipster registry as a cluster, like 2 or 3 registries will be started. It is highly available, irrespective of the factor, whether the application is down, the nodes of the JHipster registry will not have the same information. But on the other hand, it helps to have higher availability. And then we do have Console. Console is nothing but ELK-based tag, which helps you to find metrics and monitoring about your application. How many of you use ELK here? OK, so we have few hands here. So yeah, ELK is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana-based tool, which helps you to gather from the log, get information, and show the statistics of it. And one cool thing about this is here, like JHipster registry, Console, and Console, all these 3 components are separate Docker images, which you can use it in your day-to-day application currently. You don't need to configure. You just have to make sure you're pushing your logs to the Logstash server. Apart from that, there is nothing, a bigger configuration that is needed. All this comes out of the box for you. And the main problem with microservices is deployments, because you have to deploy it correctly, and there are multiple options available, which means it has a lot of boilerplate code. So JHipster does provide following options for you. Entire set of options, like you can use Docker Compose, you can use Kubernetes, you can use Heroku, and Cloud Foundry, AWS, Rancher, and OpenShift. All those configurations are automatically generated for you, which means once you develop an application, you just have to run one command. We'll see how we are generating Kubernetes configuration file, which tells you how we are doing everything and what kind of stack that you're getting. And another cool thing here to note is like all these options, like for example, Kubernetes, there is someone from Google who's writing the entire code base for generating the configuration files. On the other hand, for Heroku, there is people from Heroku coming and writing the configuration file, which makes it really robust, and they are using the latest stuff, which is really cool that you can use it straight away. OK, so now it's a demo time. So what you're going to do in the demo is we are going to create a gateway. How many of you know this one, the behind one? OK, great. I just saw it today. OK. And the next one is create a microservice. So we will create a microservice application, and then we'll try to run this thing locally. Finally, we'll deploy it on GCP with Kubernetes. Let's go ahead and see what we're going to do. So I'm opening a terminal. I went into a folder. Let me go ahead and create a gateway directory. So let's call it as JE Gateway. So inside JE Gateway, after installing JHipster, so I just run JHipster. Is it visible for everybody? OK, great. So once you've run JHipster registry, these are the default set of questions that it asks you. Whether you want to create a monolith application, a microservice application, a gateway, or a UA server, which we have seen. So we'll go ahead and select gateway, because we're going to create a gateway. Let's call this application as JE Gateway. And it asks for the port in which it has to run. So we'll say it is 8080 port, a Java package name. And then here, it's a question that it asks you whether you want to do a service discovery server into it. So we have two kinds of server. One is JHipster registry, which is completely based on Eureka. And the other one is Console. For this demo purpose, I'll use the default one, which is JHipster registry. And you can even choose no service discovery, and then add your own service discovery into it. And then it asks for what kind of authentication that you want to use. We have JWT. How many of you used OAuth 2 authentication? OK, we have 3 hands. So it generates everything out of the box. So first, we'll generate with the JWT authentication. And then the type of database, we'll choose SQL. We do have SQL and NoSQL stuffs. So SQL and SQL, we have this many databases support. We'll go ahead and use MySQL. And how many of you use H2 database here? H2 database. OK, 2, 3, yeah. So H2 is really cool database because it's an embedded database, just like that you can create and delete it. It's on the file system, which means it's very much easier to do it when you're doing it development. So let's go ahead and select H2. How many of you have used Liquibase here? OK, we have quite a many people there. Okay, so Liquibase is actually a Git for your database. It really helps you to version your database and then roll it up and roll down, all those stuffs. After that, we do have second level caching. So this is for caching your application. And then we'll use Maven versus Gradle. How many of you were fighting for Maven here? Okay, fighting for Gradle here. Ooh, Gradle wins, yay. Okay, for the demo purpose, I'll just use Maven here. And then we do have a list of other options here. You can use add Elasticsearch into your application. You can add WebSockets into your application. And you can do API-first development, as well as you can use Apache Kafka. So I'm not going to select anything here, but you can go ahead and use them together. And then we ask another question, which kind of framework that you have to use. We have two frameworks here, which is Angular 6 and React. So let me go ahead and select React here. SaaS support. So I'll just skip this part because most of you are not front-end developers, but it asks a lot of options, like whether you can choose the translations. You can choose a list of languages that are available from here. We do have Ukrainian, so let's go ahead and select it. And we do have other testing framework support here, Gatling and Cucumber. How many of you use Gatling? Load performance testing? Nobody? OK, one. Yeah. OK. So Cucumber is also a Gherkin-based testing tool. If you want, you can do it. We will generate the files as well as tests for you. And finally, we do have a marketplace. Suppose you say, I don't want Angular or React. I want Vue.js. You can go ahead and get it from the marketplace. I want an Ionic JHipster, which means I want to create a mobile application with JHipster. You can go ahead and get it from the marketplace. It's available. And there is also React Native-based Ignite JHipster, which helps you to create React Native-based mobile application with JHipster. So you can go ahead and choose whatever you want. So once you have done this, it creates all the files for you. And then it installs all the front-end stuff that you need. And added to that, it also initializes a Git repository and then creates it there. In the meanwhile, while I'm testing the internet of this conference, let me go ahead and create another directory. Let's call it as JE app. So here I'm going to generate a microservice application. Just type in JHipster. And then it will ask you same set of questions. But one main difference that you have to notice here is in Gateway, there is no, in Gateway, there will be a framework selection where you have to choose between Angular and React. But in this case, OK, the connection is not good. So here, I will go ahead and select microservice application. And then it asks for your name. Let me give it as JE app. And then it asks for the port number, followed by the package name. And here, the service discovery. I'm going to choose all the basic options that I've chosen in the previous one. Same registry, same type of authentication. You can select any database that you want, which means each microservices comes with its own databases, which is one thing that notice when you're developing microservice application. There are two kinds of microservice application you can develop. One is one database and then connect with multiple services, or you can have your own services-based database. We prefer this option because it's much more robust and much more easier to migrate stuffs. So let's go ahead and select the same thing. And then we do have cache abstraction, which means it implements cache for you. Followed by that Hibernate second level cache. I'm going to Maven again. And this is, again, the list of options that you have. We have seen already. And the I-18 support. Let me go ahead and select Ukrainian here. And the same kind of unit test or Gamma stuffs. And then once it is done, let me go ahead and marketplace. So now it also generates an application. Hopefully, it will end sooner. In the meanwhile, let me go ahead to the previous generated application. So again, if you see here, it is exactly the same structure that we have developed, JE app and JE gateway. There is not much of a difference. Since the internet is kind of slow here, let me go ahead and show the demo in here. So in order to first do it, let's go to gateway and start the application. And then I'm going to start the microservice application. I've started the gateway first, and then I'm starting the microservice application. So once you see it, once it is getting started, once it is started, it starts throwing series of error. Why it's throwing an error? Any guesses? Look, it shows a lot of error. So it will show you a lot of errors once it started. Any idea why it is throwing an error? Yeah? Sorry? Yes, a heartbeat, exactly. So it tries to send the heartbeat, but your registry is not up. The JHipster registry acts as a health checker as well as your service registry. Since your registry is not up, it throws an error. So it says, OK, I cannot find any registry. I cannot send anything to it. So can you please check that out? So let's go ahead and start the registry. So starting a registry is very simple with JHipster. So Docker compose. Since I'm inside gateway, we have a Docker file that has been generated with us, so we can go ahead and click here. So it will try to generate a JHipster gateway. So gateway will be started, and it will be running on your 8761 port. So you can go ahead and see how it is working. Oops, we started wrongly, I guess. OK. In the meanwhile, let me show you the application that is generated. So what we have done so far is we have created a gateway application, we have created a microservice application, and also a gateway. Once we have done all those three, what we are trying to do is we are trying to boot up all those three applications. We'll just see what is the code that is generated here. For example, in gateway, you can see it here. The first and foremost thing is it follows the standard structure. You have a source directory inside which you have main and web app. So inside main, you have the Docker. Here, you have listed all the Docker files that is needed. So for example, this is a Docker file that has been generated. You have also the Docker compose file for your MySQL database, which you have chosen for production. Your JHipster registry, which is a registry that we have just booted up. And by default, JHipster registry has two options similar to Spring config. So the first option is for a local or development mode, it takes it from your local repository or local database or local directory. On the other hand, in production mode, it takes the information from the GitHub repository, so which is a standard way of doing it. So we also have this inbuilt here. So when you're passing your profile as dev, it takes a value from the native, that is your local file system. But when you change it to production, as well as you change it to Git, then it takes the information from the Git repository that you're pointing it to. And then you have a Sonar file that is generated, Sonar Docker compose file. Since you have used Hasselcast, and Hasselcast management cluster is also generated. So everything is generated for you. And this app YAML is a single file. So microservices developer will know the pain point of starting and restarting all the different microservices once you're trying to do some testing in it. But with Docker compose file, it's a single file that is generated. You can start, deploy everything with a single command. So you can say Docker compose app YAML up, which means it starts everything together. And again, you have the same Spring Boot 2 based application that is generated here. So you have a gateway app from which the main file is here, from which Spring application is getting started. And in the front end, you have web app, which has all the application-related file. This is entirely built with TypeScript. How many of you use TypeScript here? OK, 1, 2, 3. OK. So it uses TypeScript. And also, we do have a complete Webpack building here. So you can see it here. So we have a Webpack, which is differentiated for dev, prod, and test. So these are the common boilerplate stuff which you usually have to do if you're developing an application, which is done by default for you. So let's go ahead and see what happened here. Oh my God. OK, it is downloading it. OK, great. OK, I'll also show you the Docker. Let's go ahead and generate Kubernetes files. So let me go ahead here. Make K8. How many of you know what is K8? OK, so let's go inside this K8 folder. I've created a K8 folder. And then let me try JHipster Kubernetes. So what it does is it checks whether Docker is installed, because for Kubernetes, Docker is needed. And then it asks you two questions, whether you have to generate your Kubernetes configuration file for a microservice application or a monolith application. Let's go ahead and say for a microservice application, which we have generated just now. The next question it asks is, in what location you have these folders? So I'll go ahead and select the previous back folder. And once you've done this, JHipster automatically detects what kind of applications are present, what are the JHipster generated component, and then it says these two applications are present. Do you want to add these two applications and create a configuration file? We say yes to it. And here it asks whether you want to use JHipster console, which is an ELK and Zipkin-based console, or you want to use a metrics only with Prometheus. So the difference between here is console is built on top of ELK plus Zipkin, which means it has tracing support in it. Also, it has metrics. Also, it has all the information about the time series information about how the databases are behaving, how the health are there, and all those information. On the other hand, in Prometheus, you can only see the metrics of the application. It's based on time series. If you want to have only the time series stuff, then you can go ahead and select Prometheus. Or if you want to have the logs, metrics, and all of the health features, then you can go ahead and select JHipster console. For the purpose of demo, I'm not going to select anything here. And it detects what kind of registry that you have used. Since in the application we have selected JHipster registry, it says, OK, guys, look, you have selected JHipster registry here. Do you want to use a different password for the JHipster registry? We'll select the default one, which is admin. Please don't use that in your production servers. And followed by that, it asks for the Kubernetes namespace. Let's go ahead and give the default here for time being. And then it asks what kind of Docker repository that you have to use, whether you want to go for a private registry or a public registry. You just go ahead and give your name. Since I'm using a public registry, I'm go ahead and give my name, Sendil Kumar, in here, which is my registry. And then what kind of command that you have to use in order to push your Docker images. Let's go ahead and use Docker push. And how many of you know the difference between a load balancer, node port, and ingress? Yep, we have few hands. So load balancer actually assigns an IP, gives you an external IP for you. On the other hand, node port, it randomizes the port because the port in which your application runs as well as the port in which the pods are running are kind of different there. And in ingress, it just allows incoming services. So let's go ahead and use the load balancer here. So once you have done this, your application has been generated. Let's go ahead and see what it has generated. So here, if you see, there are 3 different folders that are generated for you. One is application folder. The other one is a gateway folder, followed by a registry folder. In the gateway, if you can take a look, you have the deployment file, which says, which is a Kubernetes configuration file, which has specs, how many replica that you want to have, all the metadata like the labels and stuffs. And also, it gives the environment. This is something but a Docker Compose file entangled, changed in order to adapt to Kubernetes environment. And added to that, how many of you know about this readiness probe and liveness probe? Okay, we have one hand here. So readiness probe and liveness probe are extremely important stuff when you're developing a microservices application as well as in Kubernetes, because in Kubernetes, pods are self-healing, which means it can automatically do all the stuff. So liveness probe is something like it tells the application at the interval that you're saying, OK, guy, I'm alive. Don't neglect me. I'm alive. It says, OK, I'm alive, signals to the main service pod cluster. On the other hand, the readiness probe is something like once your application, like you're saying, OK, the pod is getting started, so how long do you have to wait till the application is getting deployed? So those kind of stuff you can go ahead and check it here. And we do have a MySQL stuff here, and then the deployment option for your services. So we generate everything for you, which means it's much more easier. So only thing that you have to do is tag your Docker image, and then push the Docker image to your repository, and then run this command, which means that's it. So which means you deploy everything to the Kubernetes world. So let's go ahead and see whether the application is running. OK, it's still downloading. OK, in the meanwhile, I can show you the application from here. OK, so this is what I've done just before the demo. Today, I've just deployed everything into the Kubernetes. So what I've done is exactly the same step that is listed here, which means I've tagged all those images, pushed those images into my Docker registry. So you can see my Docker registry here. Okay, internet is slow. Okay, leave that. So it's deployed in the Docker registry, and you have list of applications. So you can see it here. You have a gateway application, a MySQL database for the gateway, and all those stuffs. You have JHipster registry. Let's go ahead and access our application. So you can see it here. This is an endpoint. Since we have used load balancer, it gives an external IP for you. So on click of it, it opens a gateway application. So this is the default application that will be generated for you with JHipster. So you can go ahead and sign in with admin, which is a default username and password. So you can see here you have the administration module. You have list of things that are available, as well as you have an account module. So let's go ahead and see the user management. Like it creates a set of user for you, which means user management and role management are embedded in it. So it has this many stuffs inside. And here, if you click on gateway and check, since it's a gateway application, it shows you the routes that are available. For example, we have JHipster registry, we have JAE app, and then the gateway, which is the application itself. It shows the health of the application and other information. You can also go ahead and see the configuration, which lists down all the configuration that are available for you inside the application. So this is nothing but Spring Cloud configuration services that are available for you. Added to that, you also have audits that are added. We use Java's-based audit, which means like you have audits by default that is generated from the application. And we do have logs, which uses logback XML, which means like you can dynamically change the logging information of the application when you're debugging. It's extremely useful. We have around 1,230 varieties of logs. That's why the application is kind of slow to pick that up. But it's like you have a list of options here, and you can choose whatever you want to have it here. But if you have a look here, we have this registry that is available, but it doesn't have any external IP to it. The main reason because the registry is not exposed to the external world, which is ideal in your case. Like if you're developing an application, your registry should not be exposed to the external world, because people tend to get more information from your registry, which is not suitable for your production environment. So if you take a look, the application that is generated, it doesn't expose to the external world. You have a cluster here running, which is registry 0 and registry 1, but both doesn't give any external IPs with which you can communicate with them. So there is no external IP that are available. So just to check how this thing works, let's go ahead and see here. Let me open it. Let me go ahead and run. So what I'm trying to do is kubectl exposing the service. The service name is JHipster registry. And I expose it into the type of load balancer, and then I name it as exposed registry. I just give this command and wait for a few minutes, what this command will do is like it will create an exposed registry, which is a separate pod. And this pod is available for the external environment. You can just go ahead and click it and then see how the JHipster registry runs in the external environment. Okay, let me rename it. So you can do this multiple times. You can expose the same registry in different names in multiple ways, which means you will get a new IPs for all those stuffs, which means it's extremely useful when you're giving this to the external third-party people who want to debug your application. They can take their information from there. So you can go ahead and check. So you can go ahead and check it here in your pod details. So I'm just getting the exposed service registry, LB, for the IP. So you can see I have an IP that is listed here. So let me go ahead to the particular port number. So what it will do is it will expose the JHipster registry application that is running here. The internet is too slow here. Okay, let's wait for the internet to resolve it. Huh. Okay, we'll wait for this thing to get up. But before that, any questions so far? Yep, please. Okay, so the question is basically this. So JHipster, you generate an application, but how do you evolve your application once everything is done? Like when you try to evolve, okay, exactly. So this is also one of the common questions that we get. Like, you can generate an application. We have two approaches here. The one approach basically which we tell you guys is like, okay, if you have generated an application, keep the code as such, and then extend everything, because everything is Java-based configuration there, which means you can extend everything. And then you can overwrite whatever things that you want to overwrite and then use that as a basic. Why we ask you to do this thing is here, like at first place, it helps you to understand how this difference, it helps you to understand like whatever the changes that we are making to the application. For example, now we migrated from Spring Boot 1.5 to Spring Boot 2, which means whenever you upgrade certain stuffs, you will obviously have a conflicts which you have to merge. And that's a painful process. But if you have extended everything outside the application, which means it's much more easier for you to also change the code that you have, which also explicitly tells people like this is the entire application that is generated by JHipster, but these are the certain components that are generated by the other services. So that is extremely useful on one hand. The other approach is like whenever you try to do JHipster upgrade, yeah, we got it. Okay, once you do JHipster upgrade, we have a command called JHipster upgrade. So it goes and reads all the files, but whichever file that you have differences, whichever file that you have any differences, it tells, okay, this is the file that you have difference. So you want to override with the file that I have, or you want to change, or you want to merge it. So we do give you that kind of an option, just like how your IntelliJ works. We do have an IntelliJ plugin, I guess. So yeah, so with that approach, you can just go ahead and merge all your changes and do all those stuffs. But I would suggest like for most of the configurations, don't touch it. Go out and extend that bean and then use that bean as your configured bean. Then it's much more easier process for you to migrate. Okay, yeah. So let's see this application. Okay, great. So once you have seen this, so here you can see the application that are registered, entire instances that are registered to application, the health of the application, the statuses of application, and also the general information about the application environment in which it is running. What's cooler thing about here is like we do have an administration module here, which actually gives a lot of information about entire module of your application. Like it gives the JVM metrics, it gives the HTTP statuses, and the service statistics. Like whatever services that you have, it gives the service statistics also. And here you can go ahead and select different registry or different application with which you can run it. For example, this is an exposed registry that we have. These are the two registries that are running, and then the gateway that are running, the MSQL database, all this information you can get. And you can go ahead and disable certain services. And also you can check the health of the application for different applications, followed by the configuration. This is a single endpoint for all your microservices. So you have one unified endpoint which you give it to your ops employee or an admin. They can configure everything on your application just from this one UI console. That's one of the coolest thing. And added to that, all the JHipster application does have is this one. This configuration, which actually takes in all the Spring-based cloud configs configuration from it. So this is a single entry point for your team to understand what kind of configuration it is running, as well as what to change in that configuration. Great. Okay. And also you have an option of replicas here, which shows how many replicas are here for your application. Like if you have many replicas that are added to your application, you can see it over here. And these are the instances, the application instances. Okay, it's getting time to load. Let's ignore it. But you have the list of instances that application that are available and all other information that is related to it. So you also have, you can SSH into your application. You can go ahead and see the logs of different application from here. This console will show you different logs of the application, your registry log, your application and gateway, all those logs, it will show it over here. So you can go ahead and see it here. Great. And we do have one more website called start.jhipster.tech. And this is, again, internet, which means it's slow. OK, I should have an online version of it. So it's something similar to start.spring.io. So what it does is you can generate your application with the web UI console. So whatever you have seen so far will be generated with this start.jhipster.tech, which means it has a single UI from which you can configure all those stuffs. And added to that, we do have JDL Studio. Hopefully this loads faster. So you can generate entities with JHipster. So it also helps you to create entities as well as maintains the database for you. Since we are also working on database side, we are using Liquibase and all those stuffs, which means you have a cool language. We call it as JDL, which is JHipster Descriptive Language, which helps you to generate entities and also application from that language. Application is kind of in beta now, but you can generate entities straightforward with this studio. So you can see it here. So I can go ahead and generate entity and then give a name of it and then add in all the variables there. It also generates a data diagram for you, which you can see it here. And also you can say the relationship here. So you can create an enum. You can say the relationship, whether it's one-to-one, and all those stuff, which means it's much more easier. You just go ahead and download this file. So you have this file downloaded. So this file is nothing but this entity. And then you go ahead and say JHipster import JDL and give this file. It will generate entities automatically for you. That's it. Great. OK. So we do have a JHipster conference, which is happening on June 21 on Paris. So if you guys are interested, you can come by there, where all the cool Java Hipster developers will be there. And you can have one full day of all across the full day of conference with completely covering the full stack area of the application. And also, we do have a lot of Java rockstars coming there. So you can, if you want, you can come by there. So any questions so far? Yep, please. Yes, exactly. So that is the future plan. Like after JHipster 5, that is what we have in our mind. One cool thing that we are doing now is Blueprint, which is like you have the main application generated, but you can plug in any plugin stuffs inside, with which we are kind of generating a Kotlin-based JHipster now, which means like instead of Java code that is getting created, we can create a Kotlin-based code. So that is what we are experimenting stuff. But we are using Yeoman for generating the entire application stack, which is kind of making it difficult for us to move forward. But we are trying to do that stuff, the blueprint stuff. If it is working, then we will do it, or else we have to revamp the entire application product. But probably, most probably, the next release will have an extensive support in terms of blueprint as well as plugin as well as module stuff. Yeah. Any questions? Any more questions? OK. Great. Happy hacking. Thank you, guys.